volunteers who are actually roaming here. And David, if you wouldn't mind standing up. This is our uniform at Team Rubicon, and I'll talk a little bit about it as we go forward. But this little bullet on the front, call them by their name because again, they're all volunteers. They're here to help you. 95% of our operations, actually, and I'll talk about those, never have a full-time employee there. We are a volunteer organization driven by community members who wake up and say, I've got time, I've got energy, and I'm going to make the world a better place. So I'm Art Delacruz, I'm the CEO of Team Rubicon. And what I thought I'd do today in this seminar, titled, Team Rubicon Turning the Tide, is I'm not going to talk about, when you need a harness because the roof is pitched. I'm not going to talk about how to use furring strips to tarp roofs the proper way. I am not going to talk about, how to use a chainsaw. But what I would like to talk about is I'd like you to walk away from here in whatever capacity, in whatever organization or whatever it is you do, and say these are the things that a volunteer organization built primarily with military veterans, civilians, first responders has learned over the course of our 14 years of existence. So for those of you not familiar, and I'm proud of saying, Team Rubicon is the biggest disaster response organization in the country that nobody knows about. And with your help, my goal is to make Team Rubicon the smallest organization that everybody knows about. Because the fact of the matter is, as we deliver our services as a humanitarian organization on a global scale, and we've expanded not just into disaster response, but we're helping before through this important topic that they've talked about and they have outside for resilience, the actual disaster response, and then the long-term recovery, we're a part of all of that. And this happens across natural disasters, which we define a disaster as some type of hazard, a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, that overwhelms a community's ability to respond. So it's important to note that one of the things we pride ourselves is on our ability to pinpoint the services of our deliveries and make sure that the people we're helping are the ones who need it the most. We understand and we're proud of looking at our metrics and understanding that 95% of the services we deliver at no cost go to people who have no insurance or are underinsured for what they have. And quite frankly, in the way in the disaster space, it's the poor. And it's oftentimes Black and brown communities as we move forward. So again, incredibly proud of our mission. And we do it through 3 different services, and again, we deliver all of these for free. The first one is disaster response. Again, we started with this idea that we could go into places, help people after these disasters, and make tomorrow better for each of them. And we all know across disaster response that there's 100 things everybody needs, and we, over the course of these 14 years, developed our capabilities, which is what we can do. And we built our capacity, which means more people are able to do it and our volunteer ranks grow, and we can deliver more services. We've just entered into the world of workforce development, specifically around the skilled trades. One of the things we see in every disaster with respect to the response and the long-term recovery is prices are going to go up 30% for the materials that are going to help people recover. And then the labor is going to have a shortage, and the personnel that do it are going to have a spike in their salaries. And our goal is to contribute on the trade side, again through this lens primarily of military veterans and taking their skills, experience, and education and applying it to help in that term. We also do international services, and these international services are primarily using people with medical backgrounds. We've deployed to Malawi, after the cyclone in Malawi. We spent, just under a year helping in the Navajo Nation, delivering services during COVID. We've had teams that have operated inside of conflict zones like Ukraine. So again, that's the 3 things we do. So Team Rubicon in and of itself, founded in 2014 by a Marine sniper who said, what I see around me after the Haiti earthquake on the television is he's getting ready to go to B school. He says, this looks a lot like what I saw in Afghanistan. This looks a lot like what I saw in Iraq. And he says, I think I can make a difference. And that was my calling and my entry into this. And again, to make this a little personal, I'm going to tell you that a lot of my background and the way I run the organization, I've been the CEO for about 5 years, 6 years as a president, and then now the CEO for 4 years, is I build it based on my background. I am a humanitarian. I believe that every individual has an obligation and an opportunity to serve. I'm also a military veteran. Anybody in the audience, internal here, a military veteran? So quite a few military veterans. How many people here have an affiliation, be it family members, sons, daughters, etc.? Yeah, so we get to about 60%, 70% of the here. I joined, came out in 1992. I started flying airplanes, in this case, F-14s. I transitioned to F-18, so again, adapting with the technology as we went forward. Through it all, and this is actually my last flight ever, and it was in May of 2010. I'd made, 22 years in the military. I deployed 7 times, 6 of them into combat zones. Talk about Groundhog Day. Let's go back to Afghanistan. Let's go back to Afghanistan. Let's go back to Afghanistan. But through it all, what I really learned as I began in my personal transition as a military veteran, and I stared at my wife and my 4 kids. We'd made 14 moves. I finally get the set of orders that were the ones I didn't want because it meant I could go back to sea. I said, it's time to start looking for a job. My wife is whistling because she finally doesn't have to move. I am crying because I'm going to leave, what I thought was my, the only thing I could do. I do what everyone does as they transition. I jump on LinkedIn, shoot planes, drop bombs. No jobs found. And for those of you who raised your hand, you're probably saying something that a lot of military veterans say. For those of you who raised your hand and said, I have an affiliation with military veterans, you're probably raising your hand and you're saying, yeah, they were a little bit lost. And for those of you who are hiring or have the opportunity to bring these members on their teams, I need you to think of military veterans in a different way. And this is a great depiction. This is Mike, Marine Corps veteran, retired, also an aviator. And the way I think of this picture is nobody until we came along has asked him to say, you're a military veteran, you have skills, you have experience, you have education, you have risk tolerance, you can keep people safe, you can lead, and we can take these skills and we can put them in the field in a different way. We like to say people are built to serve. We know people don't have necessarily this purpose. And where a lot of people talk about military veterans and this idea that, hey, let's stop the 22, our job is to take military veterans, to take this unique college they went to, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and use those skills and get them in the field so they can maintain well-being. If you haven't read, the 2 articles published last week on the epidemic of loneliness, if you haven't read the Surgeon General's report on the epidemic of loneliness, it states that being alone from a physical standpoint, not having connection, not being a part of community, not building your own personal resilience, is the equivalent from a health perspective of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The mortality perspective of being alone and disconnected is incredibly important. So in each of these, I'm going to dive into what we do as Team Rubicon. It's really important that we understand that every time we serve, and volunteering is mentioned 17 times in that document from the Surgeon General, we're serving a community, and anybody who volunteers, and I hope everybody in this room and everybody outside in the overflow finds an opportunity and a way to say, I'm here to help, and I'm going to do it for the people that I'm serving, and I'm going to do it for myself. So here's the stage. We all know this. In 1980, on the years again on the horizontal axis, the days between billion-dollar disasters on the vertical axis. In 1980 to 1984, the average was 82 days between billion-dollar disasters. So every 82 days, some hazard would impact a population. The total required to recover would be over $1 billion. The rest of the graph is inflation corrected. All right, so this is in a level playing field. To the right here, in 2023, there were $28 billion disasters. 28 disasters that struck the United States that cost over $1 billion to recover from, which means it went from 82 days on average on the left to the far right, 12 days between billion-dollar disasters. So every 12 days, there's a billion-dollar disaster. This year, we've already had 19 disasters that are classified as $1 billion. There's still some in the hopper where they're going through the math, but it's on pace to maintain or break. Why are hurricanes important? Because this is what I pulled off the internet last night. The National Hurricane Center, NOAA, for the people that were here earlier, this is what the heat map looks like. 2024 has been upgraded as the worst hurricane season ever. Last week they said, we're going to downgrade it because the ocean's doing some crazy stuff, but it only takes one. It only takes one disaster here to impact populations and to have this call to action for all of us and our products and our vision and our collective teamwork to be able to say we have to help these people, and also to say for the people who are in some of these areas that get hit over and over and over again, we go, how do we begin to solve that problem by doing things that are more resilient? So this is the picture we have. In the scorecard, we're going to start racking through the names. One of those 5 will probably become Francine. And we had 2 tropical storms down there by the Yucatan. We had Hurricane Beryl, which set all sorts of records. The earliest Category 5, the farthest south Category 5. You know, it hits Houston. We've been pummeled by rain. If anybody here is from Houston, you're probably wearing the galoshes, or you're probably still trying to dry out. And it killed 96 people. That hurricane killed 96 people and caused $9.6 billion of damage. To include, and this is important too, it's easy to go, a hurricane is about wind, it's about water. It knocked out the infrastructure of Houston, and there are people who didn't survive because of heat. Heat is the other extreme that is now complicating not just the response and the recovery, it's something I think about for every volunteer I throw in the field. So again, this context is, it's happening more, the impact is severe. So this is a humble brag. So I was actually, during my time, I had the fortune of a tour as a Top Gun instructor, and I can't play volleyball. I have one ab, and I got lucky. I met the girl, and nobody would ever let me ride a motorcycle. But the thing I learned out of Top Gun is something that permeates organizationally, and I'm going to try to harp on each of you and go, in a hurricane or in a flood or in a fire, if I have an opportunity and a responsibility to run a team, or if I have an opportunity and a responsibility to contribute to greater effect, efficiency, quality of outcomes, reduce the time or reduce the cost for all of these things that I have to do, these are 3 things I learned at Top Gun. And for history buffs, in 1969, the US Navy was getting its butt kicked. 20 years earlier, during World War II, every US fighter would shoot down 14 enemy fighters before it got shot down. In Korea, it was like 13 to 1. So 13 enemy aircraft shot down for every US airplane that got shot down. In Vietnam, it dipped to 2.5. So you'd shoot down 2.5 airplanes and then you get shot down, which was unacceptable. So they stand up this school, and these, despite what all the movies say, the only job of these individuals, and the only job I had when I was there, was to say, how do you create the tide that lifts salt boats? How do you take what you know and create that and deposit that in other organizations around you? So I'm going to take some of the stuff that happened in this school, and I'm going to show you 3 different lessons. This is a picture of a merge at Top Gun, an F-14 against an A-4. Both of these aircraft are closing at about 600 miles per hour. You get to this merge and you fight. And the person in this cockpit and the person in the F-14, all you care about is winning. And one of the mentalities I took out of this time is just kind of this commitment to being the best you can, and then leeching out every opportunity you have to be better. So, we're playing softball. Of all the places to learn, it's in softball. I'm sitting next to this guy, his call sign is Stroker. Someone swings and strikes out, and kind of gleefully goes back to the other bench. And he looks at me and he says, "Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser." And what he was trying to say was, hey, you have to have this winning mentality in everything you do. And this was a student who was going through the course. Stroker was an instructor with me. And the way we inculcated in what we do is, myself, our volunteer leaders, the people who build our curriculum, how we present ourselves is, we have to do what we do best. And then we have to partner for the rest. I don't want to do what the Red Cross does. I don't want to hand out food in a disaster. I don't want to work logistics, but there are capabilities that we've committed to And for each of those things we've committed to, we said we'd be the best. And this is the list. So we do damage assessments. And it's done in a way where we contribute every ounce of information to a big pile where organizations that are helping in a disaster can say, I will take this work order. This is the information I need. And the people who are consuming this can also take that information and say, this is the work that's been done. So you catalog where the disaster is, who needs the help, what type of help they need in the situation for all of them. And it's volunteers who walk and knock on doors, or they drive down streets and they say, how can I help you, right? And we'll share that with anybody. We do debris removal. Trees fall on houses, flooded streets, moving, debris from flooded houses that will become infested with mold and make the house uninhabitable in a matter of days in some of these places of high humidity. We'll move that all to the curb. We'll separate it, in accordance with that, but we do tons of debris and removal. We have trained sawyers, actually 4,500 people across the country are trained to use chainsaws in a safe, efficient manner. We got about 600 people who are trained to use heavy equipment. We've been to places like Selma, Alabama, where we've knocked down homes and completely pushed them to the curb so they could start their lives. And we've been town after town where it takes people with orange buckets and strong backs. Most recently in Connecticut, of all places, because of one of the recent hurricanes, where we're pulling things out of basements as they do it. Domestic medical support, particularly during COVID in the Navajo Nation. EOC support. If you go to an EOC, and I'll show you a picture later on, you're going to see one of these shirts, and it's because they've built the relationship and because they've been trained in accordance with ICS, because they've built relationships. They're going to be there and they're going to have functions, and they're going to know how to do it, and they're going to have a rotation. One of the things we did recently after, I guess it was about a year ago, after the Maui fires, is we actually had volunteers take over most of the roles inside of the EOC there, so the people whose homes had been impacted and burned, their neighbors, their families, they could go take care of what they needed to do, and volunteers from across the country and the islands went to help. We do route clearance. We will have 2 teams or 3 teams, a 4-truck convoy, a compact track loader, sawyers, food and equipment, places to stay on the road. We'll literally, as you'll see in this next hurricane, we'll constitute these teams. They'll pinch from the east and the west if it's moving north. They will talk to all of the emergency managers and they'll say, this is where we want to be. Once the storm passes, we're talking to the authorities. They say these are the roads that need to be cleared first, because medical people have to get to the survivors. Firemen have to get to places they're concerned about. All of those different things happen. So that's route clearance. We also work before hazard mitigation. We have done work across the country, creating fire lines, defensible zones, helping people to put sandbags up, knowing that after burn things will happen. We've rebuilt 100 homes, or 1,000 homes, I should say. What's interesting about the homes we build, and this gets to resilience, is we take steps if there's a high probability of another storm coming, but we don't rebuild it the same way. We've rebuilt homes where we've said the last thing we want to put on a wall is drywall. We use clip-in vinyl wainscoting that we can just pull off the wall, dry off, snap back on after the flood's there. In addition to vinyl flooring, we don't use fiberglass insulation. We use something called blue jean insulation, which is shredded blue jeans with really high properties. Throw it in an industrial washer, dry it out and stuff it back in the walls and go. We rebuilt 500 homes, roofs, hurricane-rated roofs in Puerto Rico that survive 4 tropical storms a year. I talked to all of the people who've invested in those roofs as well as the survivors, and only 2 of them have leaked so far in that time. We also manage volunteers. If you can imagine a sergeant who's pulled people through the streets of Kandahar or wherever it might be, they're pretty comfortable going, I'm going to keep you safe, I'm going to keep you on task, and the work we're going to do is meaningful. And we also do a lot of exercise facilitation. This is the heat map of our volunteers. Every dot is 3 volunteers. We're somewhere around 180,000 volunteers today. Based on the technology investments we've made, I know a validated address for every one of these volunteers. I also know their qualifications. I know things like, are they a Spanish speaker? Have they completed training for ICS 300? Are they a qualified sawyer? Can they work heavy equipment? And over the course of 14 years, we've increased this, and now we have the ability to deploy them very, very rapidly. Multiple tornadoes this spring, we were cutting within 2 hours, even though it was an hour-and-a-half transit to get there, from Detroit into some of these periods. Because again, we know the people, we can contact them via SMS, and we can go from there. So this is the capacity part of it. We got tons of people. We also catalog all of these different trainings and their ability to do it. Along the right side, we know who can be command and general staff and perform those roles. We know who can use a saw, and it's not about who here has used a chainsaw. It's about who is qualified, because safety is a preeminent thing. The other piece you'll note in here is we also build volunteer instructor qualifications. We teach them adult learning. We create the syllabus for them because they find that they have immense value in moving forward, which gets to this idea of, I don't need donations. I'm going to talk about how you can help on the last slide. I need people to invest in our vision, because if they have a great experience as a volunteer, if they have skills, they'll come back year after year after year after year, and a $200 training becomes tens of thousands of dollars of valuable work in these communities as we go across the country. We also keep people up to date. If you go to our website and search for events, this is actually everything we're scheduled to do right from today till December 31st. So we have volunteers in a system where it takes them about 10 minutes to launch some type of an event or a training, to keep people up to speed on using a chainsaw, to teach people how to muck out a room properly so they do the least amount of damage, to simply give touch points where people say, I'm heard, I'm part of a community, and I'm not alone. These happen across the country as we move forward. So that's the first piece, right? The second one that I learned is, and again, you have to be really comfortable with understanding you can be better. And a quote you'd dread hearing and you'd love hearing as a student at Top Gun was, we're gonna have to see that again. And that was a really nice velvet glove way of saying, you failed. You got an F, but let's see if we can't get you up to an A on the next flight. And the way we manifest that here is with that constant idea that you can be better all the time. We understand that we can't build the winning team on the day of the game. They don't go, hey, who wants to play in the Super Bowl? And they show up in New Orleans or in Las Vegas, wherever it is. You have to be very deliberate in building that capability and capacity if you're actually going to be effective when you're there. So some of the things we do. This is a tabletop exercise. This was held in March. We exercised every communication realm. We had emergency managers involved. We had graphics all over the wall. I literally thought I was in a hurricane because of the way they'd assembled all of this. And then we had, planned failures and injects that would take the team and go, hey, the plan is changing to ensure we could be agile. And, then we did a massive hot wash afterwards, and we identified the places where we failed, where we had gaps in equipment, we had gaps in training, we had gaps in leadership, and we moved forward, and we got them up and running, and we're set. Our team is set. We've got the core team ready to fly down on Sunday or Monday, depending on what those 5 yellow dots do. We know that part of the team is being connected and known inside of the communities. This is actually in Tallahassee, Florida, after Hurricane Ian. We are here briefing with ESF 15. To the right is a gal who's been camped out for about 96 hours as a member of this team, because they called her and said, we need to coordinate very closely on how we maintain the welfare. FEMA is in that room, Tallahassee is there, Florida EOC, all of these agencies are there together, and then a host of nonprofits all trying to get after the same means. You're not in this room unless you do the thing that our Vice President of Domestic Operations has set as a goal, and he started executing it 3 years ago. He says in 3,284 counties, I think that's right, number of counties in the United States, they will know who Team Rubicon is, they will know how to get in touch with us, and they'll know what we can do. So again, that gets to the capabilities when we're there. The other piece is, it's a tribal effort when you get out there. We've got incredible partners, and we've got folks outside in these shirts. If any of you have areas of interest, they can help you. One of the things we pride ourselves on is not competing for scarce resources in disaster zones. We don't want to displace people whose homes just got wrecked so we can be comfortable. So we have mobile locker rooms. We have people that are prepared to live in tents. We are trying to be as off the grid as we can when we're there. So Under Armour, donated this or funded this. We built this locker room. We're ready to drag it to where we need to be. Need some ground, set it up, and we'll start getting to work. And then we also adopt the latest and greatest in technologies. If you're looking for kind of the where's Waldo of the thing that's going to get stolen the most in any area after a disaster, I mean, the sound of a generator starting up, is hope for people who are sitting in the dark, whose food is rotting. So those things just disappear. They're typically, cabled up. Ford came to us, and to the left you see an F-150. It's equipped with something called Pro Power on board, which means it's a running generator. You plug everything into the bed of this truck. It starts up when it needs to and provides 220. It's got a 7 kilowatt battery in it. This is actually a church in the panhandle of Florida. It was completely off the grid. They said, hey, you guys can stay here, put your volunteers, put your equipment here, but we have no power. We plugged this Ford in, ran the entire place. Our computers were recharging. We had fans running, and most importantly, when we woke up in the morning, we had coffee. But so we've got 17 of those, and we take them all over the country, and we've eliminated those. Oh, by the way, in our commitment to sustainability, running that generator for an hour is the equivalent of driving this truck at 60 miles an hour for 450 miles from an emission standpoint. So it's cleaner. It's cleaner because it's regulated and all of that. So a bunch of different things that we pride ourselves on. The final thing is, how do you keep it simple? In the airplane, when you're flying, the thing that got beat into our heads is you constantly ask yourself, am I winning or am I losing? It's binary. If I'm winning, I stick to my game plan and I keep doing what I'm doing. My obligation to myself is to go, am I losing? And as soon as I'm losing, I change my game plan and I adjust how I'm going to do it. Maybe it's not time to go nose high. Maybe it's time to add energy. Maybe it's time to leave the fight. But constantly, am I winning or losing? So as a CEO, I have to do the same thing, and I have to find a way to push it down into 180,000 volunteers, some of who will give me 60 hours a week, and some who will only show up, once every 5 years, because that's all they can give me. I have to make sure that our culture supports their ability to act, and I have to make sure our culture reinforces the idea that they'll be safe, that the work they do is meaningful, and that how they have impact is tangible as they go forward. And I learned it from this guy, Jim Kunkel, 102 years old, still alive, World War II P-38 pilot, and he just kind of said, "Look, you just got to think about what can go wrong and dedicated a ton of things with the assumption that all you've done may fail, and you're going to have to come up with a plan." So we do a lot of training. From the right to the left, we have conducted, and this is as of mid-August, those little dots you saw, we've conducted 1,700 operations, and they go from engagements, which is people meeting up and going, okay, this is what we need to work on, how are you doing, let's see what we can do. Service projects, where we'll line people up, and we might do things like, let's get the sawyers, to make sure the saws are working, and let's get them current. We might cut down trees at a Boy Scout camp. We might cut, home ignition zones. We may pair up with Habitat for Humanity and help them do it. One of the things I'm extremely proud of, and Noel is somewhere here, we helped build 200 tiny homes on the West LA VA campus for veterans experiencing homelessness. They have a place that they can go to that they can lock, they're alone. It's 44,000 nights of shelter a year for these people because volunteers are giving their time, and then we train like crazy. And the training under the 191 is in person. And you see all sorts of training qualifications up there that we can do online, and I'd invite anyone to jump into our learning management system and go for that. And ultimately, we get in the field and we help communities impacted by disaster, and I think we're up to 75 right now. You know, the other piece we pride ourselves on and have to follow is keeping people safe. You know, from my time in aviation, you know, we always use this thing called the Swiss cheese model, which means whatever happens is the result of a perfect sequence of events. If you can twist that cheese and not make the holes line up, the mishaps don't happen. So safety is one of those things where I have to know people will go, I've got to stop because this isn't safe, instead of saying, I'm going to go for it and try to get this job done, right? It's okay to say no is something that's resident in our culture because, again, it keeps us safe as we go forward. And finally, I need to know how people are doing. We survey, data's there. This is our net promoter score on the top. It's how satisfied our clients are. 90 is through the roof. I think Amazon's like 50 and a cable company's like 12. So they're happy, and we know they're satisfied with our services, but if they're not, we deploy employees to figure out what's going on, and the same for our volunteers on the bottom, and we measure those all the time, because the second volunteers are not having a good experience, it means more work isn't getting done or the important work isn't getting done. So as I close it out here, you know, my hope again, you know, in relaying kind of my background, and the things I've learned is you can walk away with these three things, right? You've got to make sure that you're focused in the disaster area and understand what you can contribute. And if you are saying you're going to contribute, be able to do it well and effectively. Because nothing is worse than showing up and saying you can do something and that work not getting done. And the reality is there's way more work than everyone can do. So let's make sure the work and the effort that we're putting into it is right. And then focus on that. It's important to make sure that you understand that it's not about building the team on the day and figuring out what you can do. Be really, really intentional in understanding how you get to a path where you have the right people, you have the right process, you have the right equipment to have impact when it's necessary. And finally, you know, trust the people through training and empowerment and leadership and mentorship to understand that they're connected to the mission. They're committed to every volunteer there and every community member from a safety aspect, and then find the people who want to join you in that effort, and you will do amazing things. So again, thank you for your time. We are Team Rubicon, a veteran-led humanitarian organization that helps global communities before, during, and after. And my last message here is I hope you will take a shot of this, or a picture, or throw it in your phone. And here is where we're at right now. And this is the part where I actually, you know, get ahead of you and you say, how can I help? There are a million things more important than money, and all of them cost money. So if you know people who are willing to connect to our mission, I have got the Army built that will take into a battle when these yellow dots turn into storms and hit our coast. We need people aligned in this vision. As I walk around here, it's not just about the products, it's about the people who fundamentally say this is what I can do, and we'd love for you to help us in that manner as we move forward. I've got team members here, I've got more volunteers here because they're out roaming. I'd encourage you to touch base with them. Please reach out to me, and thank you for attending, and have a great day.